All right. Well, here, I'll do it this way. So just got a clean copy. Okay. All right. We are. I'd like to call this special Darien Board of Education Finance Committee meeting to order. This is Friday, April 12th, 2024 at 8 a.m. Our next meeting is May 23rd. I'll be presiding this morning because Mr. Sini is joining us remotely. And thank you all for being here. We'll start with Rich, please, the review of the March 2024 financial report.
So this is the financial report through March. We are forecasting a projected deficit of 199,250. Of this projected deficit, 285,403 relates to special education. The summary of changes from the prior month are a total of $36,596 to the worse. The primary difference is the excess cost reimbursement rate decreased to 66.71%. So the uncapped entitlements submitted throughout the state were over $280 million and were $80 million more than the amount set aside by the state of Connecticut. This is likely to have an impact on next year's budget. The only way to hit the 75% target that was put in the fiscal 25 budget is for state submissions to decline by over $24 million. Given the increase in cost in special education across the state, it's likely not going to materialize. We had some health insurance census changes, which will also impact next year's budget. These are partial year changes based on individuals who started late in the year, and that's a decrease or an increase in expenditures of just over $43,000. The next is district legal fees are trending up lately, which we do have a pending transfer for $15,000. The teacher early notice incentivification is listed as a deficit of $18,000. Basketball gate receipts were slightly better by $400. Water is trending positive by $1,300. We have some savings in robotics supplies due to some competitions that did not take place earlier in the year. Tuition, some unilateral settlements came in less than anticipated, and that's a savings just over $55,000. And then heat continues to trend positive by about $31,000. So overall, the general education RCs are forecasted at a positive 86,154. And the special education RCs, again, are a deficit of 285,403. Just going through the individual RCs to note the differences. Moving to RC 11, again, gate receipts are slightly better than expected for basketball and total by $960. RC 16 district legal fees, as I mentioned, we do have a projected deficit of $15,000. We have seen an outside spike in outside legal counsel costs. We did have counsel come to a policy committee meeting. We've had a workers' compensation issue that needed counsel and some Title IX issues as well. We do expect this was likely going to stress the budget for fiscal 25 as well. Moving forward to RC 22, robotic supplies are under budget, as I mentioned, by $4,000. And then obviously the biggest change in RC 24, excess cost was originally set at 70%, and then the state reduced it to 68.06, and then submissions by the state of Connecticut were about $80 million higher, which brought the reimbursement rate to 66.71. We do not anticipate getting the second installment until the end of May, at which point we'll have about a $200,000 deficit in excess cost for this year. RC 25 health insurance is still a positive balance of just over $14,000, and that takes into account the census changes I mentioned earlier. And then heat continues to trend positive by $41,000. And just to highlight the food service, as we mentioned, food service fund, as we mentioned in the last meeting, we would like to go forward with using some funds in our fund balance in the cafeteria account to add the dishwasher and the serving tray area for Tokenique. And then obviously the flatware and the venting and the electrical work that would have to take place. This is anticipated to take about $72,000. We will be cash flow positive in April, which is typically when we turn cash flow positive, and we are anticipating a profit of just under $132,000.
Okay. All right, I'll open it to questions. Thank you, Rich. Go ahead, Robin.
Are you okay? I have a couple of questions. First of all, on the out-of-district tuition, what caused the deficit to decrease by $55,000?
Sure. So we had pending unilateral settlements where we earmarked a certain amount that was expected and then it ended up coming less.
Okay, and then also on the healthcare, I know it's census changes that cause the cost to increase, but what does that really mean? Is that
So it's an
demographic?
individual who left. So in some cases, the individual left didn't take insurance and the person who replaced them took insurance. In some cases, it's the individual left had single insurance and the person who came on had family insurance. What's
Okay.
that delta?
But that if that impacts next year, right? Because of that. Okay, thank you.
Okay. John?
And Rich, sorry, I'm hearing you. Let's see. The 18 for each incentives, is that to what you were budgeting last month?
So you're breaking up a little.
So John, did you just say the $18,000, that's what was budgeted X last month? It's coming in and out. The signal's declined.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
So the 18,000 of the last month, based on a expectation to apply the early incentive.
So I think he's mentioning the early, you're breaking up a little bit. I think you're talking about the early, the notification. So we did budget for 6 individuals at 2,000, and then we're looking to do up to, 6 individuals at 5,000. So the differential is that 18,000.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
And then one other question, am I coming in?
Go ahead, John.
Just when it comes to the ECR, when you talk about the reimbursement rate, is there any chance that that comes in a bit higher? I know we've been waffling under 70% by a few percentage points.
For this year, no. So all the districts had to submit March 1st, and so the states have collected that. They did indicate that the submissions were the highest they've ever seen, and so that is set at 66.71% for this year.
Okay, and I'm sorry, just back to the early incentive, is that going to require board approval at some point or on a transfer, or can you just talk a little bit about
So
that?
as of right now, the account has money in it, though we would likely recommend a transfer at the next meeting to kind of backfill that account. So the account where we pay what's called like essentially accrued vacation or accrued vacation payout, which is where this goes, is a sub account within health insurance. And so right now, the net of the in and the outs are about 14 to the positive. So we would anticipate bringing something back in May, but as of right now, depending on how many we get, we might not have to.
Okay, great. I'll wait till May to discuss it. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move on to budget transfers. Oh, actually, sorry, I had one question. Legal fees. Have we looked at the impact of the policy audit, because we are nearing the end of that? So with our projections, are we expecting to continue to use legal at the same rate,
Yes.
even with the audit being
Yeah,
finished?
so the other issue is that the rates are going up for Shipman and Goodwin.
Okay.
So right now it looks like about a 5% rate increase for the use of counsel.
Okay. So that basically are we anticipating using at the same rate, or we're actually going to use at a lesser rate? It's just they're up 5%.
So we might not use it as much for policy. We have used it more for things like workers' compensation and other internal matters.
Okay.
So I wouldn't expect us to use it less, but we're also going to have a rate increase.
All right. Thank you.
Hey, can I ask a question on that, Joe?
Sure.
Rich, is there a way we can track or get updated on the board use of attorney services versus, I know we don't want to, touch what the administration is using, but I just would love to see that so we really know if we want to bring in, legal opinions or bring somebody to a meeting, for example.
We can break out in terms of like type of use, whether it's, policy matters, negotiations, workers' comp issues, whatever the categories are.
Joe, would you be supportive of that? Like, given that, your role as chair and you're usually communicating? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
So we can have
Go ahead.
So we can have a schedule if you want included in the next finance packet.
In the next finance packet, which is May what, 23rd?
I believe so. Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you want to have it sooner, because I think we want to look at the run rate for legal overall as part of the budgetary adjustment.
So I will say the the budget that's currently in place, the district has never spent that little legal fees, at least in the last
Right, we
15
cut
years.
it. Yes.
So going back in munis for the last 15 years, the budget that's set would be the lowest
By a good margin.
Yeah.
So Robin and John, what about having it earlier than I mean, we won't make our final decisions until the 28th as projected anyway, but do you want it any earlier in the process?
That'd be great. If
Okay.
if Rich can pull it together.
Thank you. Okay. Budget transfers for March 24.
So the first one is for legal fees for $15,000, and then we are recommending taking the funds from savings in the heat account. And then the second transfer is for $34,000, and this would partially fund the tuition deficit. We would recommend taking funds from the heat account, from the water account, electricity, and then teaching supplies for robotics.
I'd be in support of those.
Okay, any
I'm in
questions?
support.
Okay, so the subcommittee is in support. We can report back.
Can I just ask one more question just regarding the building subs, because we still have 2 open positions. I know we're budgeting for 10 building subs for next year. And I guess the question I have is, given the difficulty it seems we've been having.
So they're not necessarily not filled. What ends up happening is we have the building subs and then a teacher who goes out on long-term leave of
Oh,
absence. If they can't find a teacher for the long-term leave of absence, they're pulling the building sub, excuse me, to do that long-term, and then effectively you're down that building sub.
Okay, right, thank you.
Okay. Review of special appropriation request for fiscal year 24 operating deficit.
So as we've talked about in the past, we obviously have a special education shortfall in the areas of consultant services, tuition, and pupil evaluations. In total, that deficit ran up $1,115,211. And then again, excess cost reimbursement being reduced to 66.71, which is slightly better. While the rate's lower because we spent more, we got more. So the actual amount from the original budget is more than expected. So the total deficit was $1,058,563. The board did approve a number of transfers throughout the year, including some savings from a vacant position due to enrollment, census changes, salary savings, and turnover, savings in negotiated settlements, summer school revenue, utility savings, et cetera. So that was a little over $800,000 in adjustments, assuming that the board approves the transfers at the next meeting. So that brings the special education projected deficit down to $251,000. Again, as we mentioned earlier, the net deficit is $199,250 as we're still holding some savings in some other areas. We did have another deficit unrelated to special education again, and that was staff turnover. We were short by a little over $300,000. The salary savings that accrued from late hires, whether it be the assistant principals or the world language teachers at the elementary schools, largely offset that staff turnover deficit. And so we are recommending that the board consider asking for a special appropriation of $199,250 at the next Board of Ed meeting on April 23rd. And then if approved, it would have to go to obviously the other committees, Board of Finance, RTM, et cetera, with the hope of getting the funding on June 3rd. And then again, we don't actually run out of money until really middle of June. So our biggest cash outlay throughout the year is the last paycheck in June where the teachers get their balloon check.
Process question from a matter of procedure, because this is not a capital request. Do we have to go to the Board of Selectmen?
We can double check.
I don't think we do.
Not 100% sure. We'll double check.
Yeah, thank you. John or Robin?
I like the timeline. We got to get this done by the end of the fiscal year, so I just want to get this in motion and then rely on the other government partner.
What is the nature of the superintendent adjustments? I understand what they are. They're just within the line
Sure.
items. but-
So the policy allows the superintendent to make adjustments as long as they're within the broad categories.
Yep.
And so we've seen some superintendent adjustments in special ed, for example, where professional development has been used to offset a little bit of tuition because that's within the same category. Contracted PT or contracted speech within consultant services, as example, is another one, or pupil evaluations. So anything that stays within broad category, if you were to cross broad category, for example, taking salaries to tuition, that requires a board approval.
Thank you. Oh, good morning, Katie. Do you have any questions? We're on the special appropriation request.
Thank you. Good morning. I apologize for being late. I have sick kids, but please proceed. Thank you.
Okay. Rich, in the memo, would you please note what you indicated that we did, what you talked about with turnover, that was the other, that there were areas of shortfall, or just a sort of a broad statement. There were other areas of shortfall in the budget that we also had to cover, but this is how we covered the special education deficit inside that category. Please.
And then just a quick question regarding the fiscal year 25 budget. Rich, can you remind us how we balance turnover, salary savings, you know, what those numbers are? Because this year they came out. I'm just wondering if we look forward to this reallocation.
Sure.
Right.
So for the current fiscal year, we did budget turnover savings of a little over 600,000. We were about $324,000 short. We did have what's called salary savings. And so turnover savings is permanent savings, where an employee leaves at one salary, you hire a new employee at a lower salary, so it's permanent savings. Salary savings are non-permanent savings. So an individual who might be a 12-month employee maybe gets hired in August for timing reasons. So you've accrued savings because you haven't paid anybody for, let's say, those 2 or 3 paychecks. So for this year, we accrued salary savings in the world language teachers at Oxbridge and Tokenique, an assistant principal at the high school and middle school, an assistant principal at Oxbridge. And so those savings helped partially offset the turnover deficit. So for next year, we did bring down the turnover assumptions because we've been seeing over the last couple of years not seeing as much savings in turnover. So we did bring it down to about $290,000 for next year. We did create a new account called salary savings in the budget for next year for $100,000 savings. And so that is savings, again, that we would assume to accrue should individuals start late. And so an example would be the assistant principals that were approved for the high school and middle school. You know, depending on how everything shakes out, odds are if we have a budget approved on May 28th, by the time you post and you recruit and you interview, the likelihood of those individuals starting July 1st is probably not strong. Doesn't mean it can't happen, but it's probably not strong. And so you'd likely see salary savings in those areas. And so then if we were to project out going forward in fiscal 25, there would be like adjustments where we're taking those savings and bringing them forward to kind of collapse that salary savings.
Okay, thank you. I mean, it's very helpful. We only have a data point of 1 right now, but it's going to be interesting to watch this trend going forward. So I love the addition of salaries.
Yeah, I agree, particularly because our turnover rate is from an FTE perspective remains high, and you've said it 1,000 times, that remains high, but it's just staff moving between districts, not moving up through the ladder. So I think that's something we'll continue to talk about. Thank you. Okay, any other questions on the special appropriation request? Does everybody feel like the board will have the information it needs to make that decision on the 23rd?
Yes.
Yes, Robin?
Yes.
Katie, you comfortable with what's here and the request? Okay, great. All right, public comment.
Good morning. If anybody in person would like to participate in public comment, please come up to the podium and wait for the chair to recognize you. If anyone online would like to participate, please use the raised hand icon. Please note that you need to state your name and address for the record, and you will have up to 3 minutes to comment. We have no raised hands at this time.
Okay, all right. With that, may I have a motion to adjourn? That is
Motion.
Robin, seconded by
Second.
John. All those in favor?